In 2018, this movie called The Green Book came out, starring Mahershala Ali about a Black pianist, Don Shirley, touring the South with his Italian-American driver.
I'm a musician. I'm about to embark on a concert tour in the Deep South. Do you foresee any issues in working for a Black man?
You in the Deep South? There's gonna be problems.
I'm a historian, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, something feels off. Turns out I was right. Shirley's family said the movie wasn't exactly true to life. Like fellow Oscar winners driving Miss Daisy or Crash, The Green Book wasn't about accurately portraying what it was like to be Black in America. It was about telling a feel-good race story that wouldn't upset white folks.
It's a movie critics are calling brave, powerful, and made me feel great about being white.
Writing a love letter?
But this movie also meant that a lot of people learned for the very first time what the Green Book was. And then it seemed to me like the Green Book started popping up all over the place. In TV shows,
The Simmonsville Dinette isn't making the guide.
YouTube video essays, articles, news segments.
A traveler's guide back in a hostile time, which some people still remember all too well.
In case you missed those stories, allow me to catch you up. The Negro Motorist Green Book was a book, a directory of literal safe spaces for Black travelers in mid-20th century America. Where could you stop to eat, to rest, to refuel? The Green Book had you covered. You could look at a copy and you could see lists of Black-friendly hotels and restaurants and the like. But even though I was seeing the Green Book come up in pop culture all around me, I wasn't seeing much about the Green Book in Cincinnati. As a historian focused on Cincinnati's Black history, I know that all too often, you can't find this information in an archive or library. You have to talk to folks firsthand. So when I started this journey of researching the Green Book in Cincinnati, I knew who to call first.
I remember traveling, our parents made a game out of it. Be on the lookout for Exxon. For years, I thought that's because my dad's Ford would only take Exxon gas and he was picky about his gas. But I later found out that Exxon was in the Green Book.
Dr. Gina Ruffin Moore literally wrote the book on Cincinnati's Black history. And she's not just a historian of the Green Book. She can look back on her own life and see how pivotal this little booklet was.
We went on a trip and stopped at a gas station, gave the guy $20. Father was waiting for his change of $10. And the guy looked at him like, what? And my father said, my change, please. And he said, what change? And my father, who was in the military, very respectfully said to him, now, I know how to count. You know how to count. I need my change. And the guy said, well, maybe we'll call the sheriff to see if he can work this out. Well, there was my father, my mother in the car with the three of us kids. So Dad just got back in the car and we drove on. Had my father had a Green Book, he could have looked in that book and possibly have seen that that was one of the gas stations he should have stayed away from.
Thank you for sharing your family story. That was really helpful in contextualizing and envisioning. So before we really get into it, can you give us a brief backstory on origins of the Green Book, where it came from? Like, how old phone books just showed up in the mail? Was it like that, or was there a face behind it?
There was a mailman named Victor Hugo Green, and he was in Harlem. And in 1936, he started the Green Book. With him being a mailman or postman, as they used to call him, when people would travel, they'd often, if they saw the mailman and they needed directions or information, they'd stop and ask. So he came up with the idea of putting a booklet together that listed restaurants, gas stations, all kinds of places that people might need.
Green recruited his wife, Alma, to help him compile the book and used his Postal Service network not only to get local on-the-ground intel, but to help him distribute it throughout the country.
That was another reason why he did the book. If you're not from these parts, so to speak, if you're new to a town, you don't know where to go and where not to go.
And the Green Book could not have arrived at a better time. Remember, this is the middle of the 20th century, which means that Americans were becoming increasingly mobile. Between 1950 and 1960, car ownership rose by 70%. So by 1956, when the Interstate Highway Act was passed, America was full tilt into a new identity as a car-first nation.
In this century, America has become a nation on wheels. We ride on wheels to work, to shop, to play, to go about any place we want to go. We depend on wheels to bring us the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the things we use. But when we depend on wheels, we depend also on...
When it comes to Black car ownership, we don't have precise numbers, since questions about cars weren't on the census at the time. But the 1950s saw a surge of Black Americans entering the middle class. Companies like the Ford Motor Company were hiring Black men at a greater rate than in previous decades. And combined with a booming post-war economy, this meant many Black families could buy new cars of their own and hit the road. But for many Black Americans, that freedom didn't come without risk, and their very valid concerns didn't magically disappear as they crossed the Mason-Dixon line. So the Green Book was born in New York, which is surprising, but when we think of segregation, it's almost always associated with the Jim Crow South, right? But why would Ohio be in the Green Book?
Cincinnati is the gateway to the South. I call it a northern city with a southern exposure. That would be like if you came to Cincinnati and you were from somewhere else and you ended up smack dab in the middle of Norwood in 1936, that would be a problem.
Norwood's about 6 miles northeast of Cincinnati, about a 12-minute drive or so.
At the time, Norwood was called a sundown town. And if you were lost and you weren't quite sure what to do or where to go, and you ended up in a sundown town or in a certain community where they were not so friendly to Negroes, as we were called back then, that would be a problem. So a lot of cities in the United States of America, whether they were in the North or the South, the mindset of treating certain people differently, that didn't change depending on what state you were in.
Doing more research and learning all about this from Ms. Ruffin Moore, I realized that the freedom of movement a car unlocked for Black Americans was a source of fear for their white counterparts. Remember, the U.S. broadly, and Ohio specifically, had a history of laws like the Fugitive Slave Act and the Black Codes, passed specifically to restrict the movement of Black bodies. And with car culture on the up, Black movement and white fear found themselves on a potentially deadly collision course. Something like the Green Book wasn't just for comfort. It was for survival. No wonder that the Green Book became the Bible of Black travel. By 1962, over 2 million copies were in circulation, and in the Cincinnati editions, one neighborhood was represented more than any other. I remember in the Green Book, looking through it, there were a lot of places that were in the West End. The West End was one of the first Black neighborhoods in the city, and by the turn of the century, it was thriving with restaurants, bars, civic societies, and churches. But none of the Green Book sites there are still standing today, not even the Cotton Club, which was probably the most famous one in the city. In our podcast, we have talked very thoroughly about urban renewal, about how the West End was demolished, razed. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of places, a lot of businesses that you can't even see that landscape anymore because it's highway.
Right. I once signed a contract with a book publisher to write a book about the Green Book, and I started my research, and I got so disillusioned because of about 6 or 7 places cited in the Green Book. Only 2 of them still existed. So I was thinking to myself, my book will now have a photo of an expressway, a sidewalk, and a wall, and then the other 2 or 3 that still exist. It frustrated me, It just made me mad.
A few years ago, I was doing some field reporting for our Evanston episode, and I remember one week I went to the Evanston Business District,
Yeah.
and I met with the lovely, amazing Beverly Lamb. We had our interview, and then the next week I came back and did another interview, and a building that was listed as a Green Book site that I had identified and I wanted to talk about in the episode was completely demolished. It was gone.
Wow.
It was devastating. Are there any Green Book sites left in Cincinnati that we can actually go see and learn about? The answer, Ms. Ruffin-Moore told me, is yes. And they're all in the same 1 mile radius in the neighborhood of Walnut Hills. Welcome to Urban Roots, the podcast that preserves place through story. I'm your host, Deqah Hussein-Wetzel. I'm a preservationist and a doctoral student with roots here in Cincinnati. And I am so glad to be back this Juneteenth on Cincinnati Public Radio, thanks to our amazing sponsors, Eric and Jan Michelle Lemon-Kearney. For the next hour, we're going to visit 3 buildings, each in Cincinnati, each in Walnut Hills, and each in the Green Book, after this short break. Welcome back to this Juneteenth feature. I'm Deqah Hussein-Wetzel of the Urban Roots podcast. Today, we're talking about the Green Book. As we discussed before the break, in the mid-20th century, many African Americans used the Green Book when they drove to Cincinnati as tourists to make sure they could stay safe while they experienced what the city had to offer in terms of food and entertainment. But if we rewind the clock a little earlier to the 1910s, then we can see that most African Americans came to Cincy for another reason, to work.
Cincinnati, Queen City on the mighty Ohio River and southern citadel of the state, has its own exciting story. Colorful Cincinnati is also noted for her thriving industry. Industries such as soap, which this Ohio city produces in vast and variegated quantities.
Thanks to its geographic positioning on the Ohio River, Cincinnati had almost always been an engine for industry and commerce. Before 1910, Cincinnati was consistently ranked in the top 10 most populous cities in the country. Afterwards, its population still climbed steadily. Simply put, in the early 20th century, Cincy was hot. Now, while it's true that Black Americans in the South left their homes to go toward better economic opportunities, this narrative does gloss over a very harsh reality of what they were fleeing from. According to records held by the NAACP, 4,743 people were lynched between 1882 and 1968, and those were just what we know of. It doesn't count the non-fatal tortures, beatings, and assaults that happened. Here's how civil rights photographer Ernest Withers talked about it in a PBS documentary on the American experience.
I had a cousin that was living in Mississippi and was walking down the sidewalk, and a man slapped him and knocked him off the sidewalk, and he got up. Instead of killing the white man like he wanted, he just started walking and never stopped until he got to Memphis, and never stopped until he got up to Chicago.
So, if you were one of the 6 million people of the Great Migration hopping on a train or getting in an automobile headed north, you weren't just stopping in a place like Cincinnati on a tourism jaunt. You were either making a pit stop on your way further north, or you were making a new home. Unfortunately, however, in the 1910s in Cincy, affordable housing was scarce. Black workers often packed into dark, dangerous tenements, mostly in the West End. But if you were lucky, you ended up at the Gordon Hotel in Walnut Hills. The Gordon was the brainchild of a local white millionaire named Jacob Schmittlapp. Inspired by the 5% philanthropy movement in England, he formed a company that developed high-quality housing for workers, but limited returns for investors to a modest 5%. As a result, the Gordon had baths, steam heat, and hot and cold running water, and electric lights, all unusual amenities for low-income lodging in 1916. There was even a cooperative grocery store on the bottom floor and an outdoor garden. He named it after Robert Gordon, a former enslaved man who had become a prosperous real estate developer in the area. It was still housing and temporary housing in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And for folks flipping through the Green Book, searching for a low-budget home base where they could stay while they looked for work and started to make a new life, the Gordon was their best bet. But if you had a little more money in your pocket, you may have opted for another place in Walnut Hills, the Edgemont Inn. If you live in Cincinnati today, you may have been to the Edgemont before, but you probably know it by another name.
Oh, okay. What? Okay, so walking from the side of the building, from the outside. I found Skylar, yay. Have we ever IRL met? Oh my God, this is awesome.
Crazy.
Have you ever been to the Stowe House here?
I haven't.
On a cool morning last month, I met our former intern and recording assistant, Skylar, at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House, a friendly 2-story yellow brick house on the corner of Gilbert Avenue and Martin Luther King Drive.
I think there was somebody in there because I definitely saw that lady that walked out. Hi, Christina. So we're here to meet with Zinnia.
Come on in. I've got another film crew here for
The house looked grand but cozy.
Amazing.
It had pink floral wallpaper, a dark hardwood floor, and a prominent staircase. I noticed a little table off to the side with a stack of books on it. Right away, I noticed.
Oh, they have the little green book, original green book here from 1940. Cleveland, Cincinnati. So we got hotels. There's a cotton club. There's Cordella, Del Mar, Mance. Then the taverns here, Edgemont Inn. So that's where we're at.
As I was looking over a 1940 edition of the Green Book, our guide Zinnia arrived.
My name is Zinnia Stewart, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House, and I'll be taking you on a tour today.
Zinnia explained that the Stowe family lived in the house from 1833 to 1851. Cincinnati was a stone's throw from slaveholding Kentucky, and Harriet's experiences living here inspired her to write the pivotal anti-slavery novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Zinnia led us upstairs to a simply furnished bedroom
that this would have
with a
never
bed,
been able
a
to be a
vanity,
boarding house
and a window.
Because the room we're standing in right now did not exist when Harriet Beecher Stowe lived here.
In the early 1900s, another white family bought the house from the Stowes and built an addition onto it. In the 1930s, they left, and the building became the Edgemont Inn, catering to a black clientele.
In this room here, we have what a woman would have needed. You know, we have her vanity station where she has her makeup and her pressing iron and her curling irons and all of the things that she would have needed to make herself beautiful in the morning.
The room was the home of a Mrs. Irene Bacon. We know from census records that sometime between 1930 and 1940, Mrs. Irene Bacon went from being just a lodger to the proprietor. This wasn't unusual for the time period. Actually, the Green Book was full of establishments managed by Black women.
This wasn't a temporary stay. It wasn't like a hotel. These people lived here for years. And we know that most of these people were from the South because on the census, it lists where their birthplace was from. And most of these were workers, janitor, cooks, housekeepers, so common working people.
The census is basically the only source of information for these lodgers. For example, the only details we have about Mrs. Bacon's life are from the census records and a few newspaper articles.
We know that she had one child who passed away shortly after its birth, baby Bacon. We also know that Irene was involved in politics because she was also listed as a campaign manager for a politician that was running. And we know that she was a businesswoman because she ran a boarding house and she was involved in her community. But we know very little about her outside of that. She is a mystery.
While we can't know for sure, it is entirely possible that Mrs. Bacon would invite her fellow campaign volunteers to meet and gather at the Edgemont Inn, in part because the Edgemont was easy to get to. It was right by the popular Peebles Corner streetcar stop. But more importantly, below the boarding rooms on the first floor is one of the most popular Black spaces in the whole neighborhood, the Edgemont Inn Tavern, a mainstay in Cincinnati's Green Book listings. Zinnia took us downstairs to take a look.
This room we're in right now, this would have been the tavern room for the Edgemont Inn.
We were standing in a large room with a cream floral wallpaper and dark wood furniture. The ceiling has these dark wood beams and a gold chandelier. In the corner, I spy a fireplace with a gorgeous dark green tile.
There was records of meetings being here. The Dental Association were meeting here. The Women's Council were meeting here. Politicians were running their campaigns out of this house.
It was also a bar, and at night, it could get rowdy. Folks would drink, eat, play cards, and dance before heading out to the Cotton Club in the West End or another local Walnut Hills bar. And folks had options. After all, at this time in the late 30s and early 40s in Walnut Hills, the African American community was thriving. Lincoln Avenue was lined with successful Black-owned businesses. At the same time, the neighborhood's residents were becoming more educated and well-to-do.
We had Black doctors in the area, like Lucy Oxley.
Dr. Lucy Oxley, the first Black graduate of the University of Cincinnati's medical program in 1935.
Marion Spencer, they lived above Mangram's Pharmacy because their family owned it.
Marion Spencer, the civil rights activist who brought the legal case to desegregate Coney Island and went on to become Cincinnati's first female African-American vice mayor.
They weren't allowed to live at UC, so they lived above the pharmacy in Walnut Hills. So that's what this area was like. It was very much the high achievers of the Black community.
By the early 40s, a group of more upper-class Walnut Hills residents started to worry that the Edgemont Inn's more boisterous reputation as a tavern and boarding house would tarnish the neighborhood and eclipse the building's anti-slavery past. And no one was more concerned than a Walnut Hills resident by the name of Mr. George W. Conrad.
He was a lawyer, so he was an affluent African-American man himself. And he wanted the house to basically reflect his social standing. That's why George W. Conrad didn't want it to remain a boarding house. It shouldn't be ran down and being used as a boarding house that we will eventually destroy and become dilapidated. He wanted it to be preserved and well kept and kind of exclusive.
So Conrad started an organization to buy and save the house. He was the president. And he recruited the creme of Walnut Hills' business community to join him.
In that group, we had AKAs, we had Procter & Gamble, we had Delta sorority, we had the Black Doctors Foundation. Also, we had the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, who there's an article about them singing and collecting nickels and dimes to save and protect this house.
So in 1943, when the association purchased the house, it remained a boarding house for a short while. But in 47 or 48, I believe, that's when it became a museum.
Property was transferred to the state of Ohio, and the home became a museum dedicated to the memory of Harriet Beecher Stowe and her family. In the 50s, it was run by a Black woman named Melvina Smith.
And Melvina, according to her children and the community, and she kept this house beautiful. She had kept the grounds beautiful. She was an avid gardener, so there were lots of daisies. She kept it in pristine shape.
And that's just how the house remained for decades. Thanks to its identity as the home of Harriet Beecher Stowe, it was saved, maintained, manicured, and preserved. The house was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1970. And in 1974, it was listed as a local landmark, which meant it could never be demolished. But the part of the history when it was the Edgemont Inn and Tavern, for quite some time, that part of its identity was ignored or downplayed. Then, in the 21st century, the nonprofit organization managing the museum, the Ohio History Connection, raised private and public funds for a much-needed restoration. And that opened up a new opportunity to rethink this building's dual histories.
When they did the restoration, the Ohio History Connection's idea was to restore it only to the Harriet Beecher Stowe period. So they were going to tear off anything that was from the 1908 edition. But with removing that portion of the house, you also remove that portion of the house's history. So through the restoration, with the influence of the people who work at the house, that we were able to find a way to depict both periods of time. So certain parts of this house you will see, like if you look here, that partition, it looks like a door, but it's actually That's where the house would have ended in the Beecher period.
So thanks to a $2.5 million renovation, the Stowe portion of the house was preserved to look exactly as it was in 1840. And the 20th century edition looks just like it did in 1940 during its Green Book days. The house's two pasts now stand side by side in one building. Both are represented as important chapters in Cincinnati's history. Plus, the house's listing in the National Register of Historic Places was recently amended. Now, it includes both the Beecher family home and the Edgemont Inn in its periods of significance. As a historic preservationist familiar with Cincinnati's Black sites, I am so grateful folks at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House spoke up to make sure its Green Book history was saved. But I do wonder, what would have happened to the Edgemont Inn if it hadn't been connected to Harriet Beecher Stowe? Would people have fought to buy it and protect it? Would someone have cared for it meticulously? Would it have garnered the money it needed to be maintained? Would it have been saved? To answer these questions, I knew I had to go visit another Green Book site in Walnut Hills, one whose history didn't go back to abolitionist days. After the break, we enter the Manse, the hotel for the Black elite of 1940s and 50s America. Welcome back to our Juneteenth feature on the Green Book. I'm Deqah Hussein-Wetzel of the Urban Roots podcast. For the break, we introduce you to two Green Book sites in Walnut Hills that catered to regular folks like you and me. But when greats like Duke Ellington, Jackie Robinson, or Thurgood Marshall came to Cincy, where did they go? They couldn't stay at the white-only lodgings downtown. So they turned to a 3-story brick building on Chapel Street in Walnut Hills. With its 108 luxurious rooms, first-class restaurant, and large ballroom, the Manse Hotel was the crowning achievement of Horace Sudduth, a Black businessman born in Kentucky. Starting out as a Pullman porter, he became one of the first African Americans in Cincinnati to have a real estate license around 1910, and began acquiring and managing properties soon after. He opened the Manse in 1931. Sudduth was a Renaissance man. Beyond real estate, he dipped his toes in acquisitions, mortgage transactions, and even entertainment. The Union newspaper, a Black paper of the time, even followed its business adventure in an occasional column called Horace Still Selling. By the 50s, Sudduth was one of the city's wealthiest Black residents, known nationwide as a Black millionaire. But for Sudduth, it wasn't all about the Benjamins. He wanted to do his part to help his community, and at a time when redlining was commonplace, he enabled African Americans in the West End and Walnut Hills to open savings accounts and mortgages, making homeownership possible for hundreds. If I wanted to know more about Horace Sudduth and the Manse, there was one person I had to call, and she just so happens to be one of the sponsors for this very episode.
I'm Jan Michelle Lemon-Kearney, Vice Mayor of the City of Cincinnati. So let me just start by saying, my Uncle Horace Sudduth built the Manse.
Your uncle is Horace Sudduth?
My uncle is Horace Sudduth, and also he's the reason that my father moved here too, because after World War II, Horace Sudduth was like, you really need to think about, when you finish your residency and all that, he was a doctor, come to Cincinnati. And he said, the Black business community is booming here. This would be a great place for you. And so
Jan Michelle's father was sold.
He did decide to come to Cincinnati. So, he had met my mom during his residency in St. Louis, brought her to Cincinnati. They needed a place to stay when they got here after their wedding. And so they stayed at the Manse Hotel. I guess their honeymoon and everything, in their first few months of being here, this was their home. And, my parents remembered, like, Joe Louis would come through, with his entourage. And
Joe Louis, the heavyweight champion.
Weighing 198 3/4, wearing black trunks, the famous Detroit Brown Bomber, world's heavyweight champion, Joe Louis.
And he wasn't the only athlete to stay at the Manse. Apart from Jackie Robinson and Hank Aaron, Cincinnati Reds first baseman Frank Robinson temporarily lived at the Manse Annex in 1956. Hank Ballard wrote the twist in one of its hotel rooms. James Brown stayed at the Manse in 1956 when he recorded his first release at King Records.
You know, just like a lot of famous actors and singers of the day. I mean, it was really the place to be and to see and be seen. A lot of the black organizations had their events here. So, you know, Jack and Jill and the AKA and Delta Sigma Theta, they all had their big balls here and everything. This was like the place to be. They just loved this place. Like the kitchen in our house was modeled after the Manse Hotel's coffee shop because my dad loved it so much.
That's cool.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Unfortunately, however, despite the fact that throughout the 1950s, the Manse was beloved both by Cincy locals and the rich and powerful visitors who came to town, it could not survive what came next. Victor Hugo Green always hoped for a time when his guidebooks would no longer be needed, and that time did come. In 1964, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, which outlawed segregation. 2 years later, the last edition of the Green Book was published. Integration meant that African American travelers didn't have to be as wary about where they went on their travels. But unfortunately, it also had negative implications for Black-owned businesses around the country, including in Walnut Hills. To learn more about this neighborhood and its history since integration, I called up a pillar of the Walnut Hills community. She met me in front of the Manse.
Thank you. So good seeing you.
Thank
you.
We'll talk to you soon. Oh, that's so nice. Everybody knows you. That's great. So how long have you lived in Walnut Hills?
So I've been in Walnut Hills for over 30 years.
Catherine Gardette loves her neighborhood and has made herself familiar with its history. She told me that during integration, people not only chose to leave Walnut Hills for other neighborhoods that were once unavailable to them, they also chose to patronize white businesses that they couldn't previously enter.
When you have other options, the option that was your only option goes to the bottom of the list many times. And I believe that's what happened here around this property.
In the late 1960s, Horace Suddett's family, facing plummeting sales, sold the Manse. It was converted to apartments, and then it was abandoned. By the turn of the 21st century, the Manse Hotel, once the pinnacle of Black luxury in Cincinnati, was dilapidated, falling apart.
And imagine a building boarded up, grass high, going through the sidewalk, glass broken. Knowing that this was the place during segregated times that Blacks could come and be joyful together, that's very important.
Catherine and the others in Walnut Hills knew they needed to do something to save the Manse.
So we are a community of tenacious individuals. When we make our minds up about something, we go en masse. We all show up together to let it be known that this is something that is important to this community.
They were showing up at local community meetings, and that's when Catherine met a developer named Katie.
Are you Katie?
I'm Katie.
I'm Deqah.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
And are you guys familiar with each other? Yeah.
How are you?
Yes.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. My name is Katie Rademacher. I'm the senior developer with the model group.
Catherine told me that Katie was the best person to pick up the story where she had left off. So Katie and I headed inside the Manse. On our way to the ballroom, we passed by portraits hanging on the wall, depicting many of the famous guests who once stayed here.
Harlem Globetrotter, Duke Ellington, James Brown,
There we go.
Jackie Robinson, Count Basie. So this is Billie Holiday.
Frank Robinson, Thurgood Marshall. So we are standing in the Manse Hotel ballroom. You can still, feel the size and grandioseness of the space.
Yeah, this is a big open room, and the ceilings are really tall, and so that didn't change. Like you guys
kept that. Yep.
Yeah, you kept a lot of what you could.
14-foot ceilings we kept. Yeah. So during the renovation, we uncovered a variety of different wallpaper patterns that were on the walls when it was a hotel.
They're really pretty and really unique. Oh, I love this so much.
I said there wasn't much of anything remaining from when it was a hotel, so to see this, it was like, oh, a little glimpse.
Were you familiar with any of the history there?
Let me start. This is interesting. So when we first started working on this project, we were going to tear it down.
Okay, wow.
We had no idea it was this culturally significant to the Black community in Walnut Hills and in Cincinnati. And it needed extensive renovations. And that's why we were planning on tearing it down, because it was just very cost prohibitive. And like we try to save buildings whenever we can. And so for us to look at this and be like, no, we don't think we can save it was a big deal. But then going to the community meeting and hearing about the history, and we're like, oh my gosh, we can't tear this building down. We need to come up with a different plan because we have to save it. We gotta figure this out. And at that point, it was not listed on the historic register.
So that was one of the first steps. Katie worked with an architect to get the building listed on the National Register.
Getting that approval unlocks federal historic tax credits. The state historic tax credits, which we also got, were competitive.
You want to listen? Sure.
At that moment, a local Mance resident appeared at the ballroom door.
Sure.
I'm fascinated with the building. I had no idea before I moved here anything that it was. And then I discovered that my great aunt, who was the first African-American teacher in Glendale, Ohio, walked these halls. So now that I live here, it's totally personal.
How neat, yeah.
So
Melanie Johnson has lived in one of the Mance's 60 affordable apartments for seniors for the past 2 years.
I just want it to be preserved and treated with the love, honor, and respect that it deserves. Because I don't know how it became what I heard it was before. We cannot let that happen again.
Yeah, that was before Model Group purchased it. It was in disrepair and it needed, yes, it needed a lot of work.
I just don't understand how did we ever let it get to that. You know, we have greats walking these halls like, you know, James Brown and Duke Ellington and people of that stature. You know, this is something that we got to keep around.
I think people forgot what was here, because Katie was saying that once Model Group had heard from the community all of the things that were important about this building, they were like, well, we need to preserve it.
Absolutely.
It's not going anywhere. We got it listed. It can never be torn down.
Good.
And as long as Model Group owns it and Episcopal Retirement Services is the manager, it will continue to be affordable housing.
Okay.
Plus, Katie explained, it's been designated as affordable housing. So even if it did change owners, the Mance's 60 units for seniors will remain affordable for the next 30 years. Feeling assured, Mrs. Johnson headed home, and Katie and I continued to talk brass tacks.
Could we actually maybe we go back outside?
Yeah, we can go this way.
Okay, you know your way.
Once outside, I asked Katie to break down exactly how she made such a complicated, expensive rehabilitation and affordable housing project even happen.
This project was over $13 million to do. Keeping it affordable, it's not going to pencil out with just getting a loan from a bank. The rents that you can charge aren't high enough. You need to get different funding sources to make it actually work. And so I'm applying for all the different funding sources. Ohio Housing Finance Agency provided the low-income housing tax credits. I mentioned the historic tax credits. Federal Home Loan Bank provided $1 million in a grant for this project. City of Cincinnati, $1 million. We provided some of our own developer fees put back into the project to make it work. All the variety of funding sources we needed to stack to make it feasible. There's a lot to it, and so
that's your job.
Yes. And then Episcopal Retirement Services fundraised over $250,000 so that we could do those portraits in the common area and the mural.
We walked over next door to one of Model Group's new affordable apartments and checked out this mural painted on the side of the building.
So they, knowing the history here, they went to their pool of donors and to the public to really bring bring that story to life in a more public way.
Right. I've never have been inside this building, but
but you can see the mural, and that was important to us. And
The mural, designed by artist Cedric Michael Cox and painted with artworks and local youth, is vibrant. Horace Sudduth presides over one side. On the other, a young man's hands holding a growing neighborhood and a person gesturing upward towards the manse and a large glowing sun. It's a mural that is joyful, that is hopeful, and that celebrates community and what is possible when community comes together.
we're trying to positively transform communities. We can't do that if we're working against the neighborhood and the people that live there.
I appreciate that you take care with the community. What you do is really inspiring.
When I got home from my trip to Walnut Hills, I was thinking about everything I'd learned about the Green Book and these 3 sites in particular, the Gordon, the Edgemont, and the Manse. There are so few Green Book sites left around the country. Architectural historian Jennifer Root estimates that less than 20% of the sites listed in the Green Book are still standing. Only 20 Green Book properties are listed in the National Register of Historic Places. For a long time, this chapter of American history just wasn't deemed important. And since many of these buildings weren't architecturally significant, preservationists didn't prioritize keeping them around. But in Walnut Hills, something was different. Sure, the Gordon was renovated, so it's hard to know its history, but it's there. To help process my thoughts, I wanted to call up Ms. Ruffin Moore one last time. The Manse was brought back from the brink of destruction and now has this huge mural telegraphing to all of Cincinnati, hey, I'm here. I'm part of the city's history. I matter. What was it about this neighborhood that resulted in not just 1, but 3 Green Book sites maintained and 2 preserved and celebrated? We've only seen the remaining Green Book sites that are extant in Walnut Hills. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Do you think that the strong community activism in Walnut Hills played a part?
I do, yes. Walnut Hills, that community survived, I believe, because of the commitment of land ownership and the value of the education system, and the people were willing to work together. So I think these places in the Green Book are more than places. They are monuments to the hard work and determination of a people who started a race, this race called life. And even though it was a 50-yard dash, they started way in the back and were able to not only catch up, but pass other people.
No, 100%. That I think these Green Book sites that we've identified are places that connect us to the past, but like in a real way, right? The tangible building, the marker, the Manse has a marker, the Edgemont Inn has a marker. I mean, the Edgemont Inn story with how the Harriet Beecher Stowe house ended up being the Edgemont Inn, that in and of itself, it's really neat that building showcases these like 2 eras of Black history.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's wonderful.
My last question for you is like kind of a personal one. Why does preserving Green Book sites matter?
It matters because it shows we were here. I don't want to get religious on you, but there's a story in the Bible where someone was traveling and something happened, and God told the guy, put some stones there and build a monument to remember this place. So the person did that and traveled on. But I thought about it later and I said to myself, we've got to start doing that. More people have to start doing that for their family, for their relatives. I mean, it's like that marker gives the later generations a place to see and show them what was done before.
So many Green Book sites no longer exist. But these three, the Gordon, the Edgemont, the Mance, they do. They not only have markers, they are markers. Markers of community, of persistence, of permanence. And now I'm thinking back to Catherine Garnett, standing outside the Mance Hotel.
Close your eyes and imagine a building boarded up, grass high, going through the sidewalk, glass broken. And now imagine that not being there, where it is energy and vibrancy again, where there are people there, where it's landscaped, where there's conversations about the good old times and the current times, and how people helping people is once again what's happening in that building. That's what's happening here in that space. And that came about because of community tenacity. The people that come to visit know this is what this building was before. There are times that history is forgotten. And it's those of us who are living in the present moment that need to be the caretakers of ensuring that history isn't lost.
Thank you for listening to Urban Roots Podcast's production of this Juneteenth feature on Cincinnati Public Radio. This episode was made possible thanks to the sponsorship of Eric and Jan-Michelle Lemon-Kearney. Special thanks to all the folks who made this episode possible, some of whom you've heard in this episode: Gina Ruffin-Moore, Zinnia Stewart, and Christina Hartlieb of Friends of Harriet Beecher Stowehouse, Catherine Garnett, and Katie Rodemacher of Model Group. Historical research was courtesy of Tania Mohammad and me, Deqah Hussein-Wetzel. Big thanks to Jeff Sutton and Joanna Morris of the Walnut Hills Historical Society for sharing their previous research. This episode was recorded by me and Skylar Ficklin. This episode was written by James Bennett II and Vanessa Quirk. It was story edited by Vanessa Quirk. It was audio edited and designed by Connor Lynch. Mixed by Andrew Calloway. Music and sound effects are from the Envision Library. And it was hosted by me, Deqah. This June, the Urban Roots podcast team has also been producing 90-second shorts on Cincinnati's Black history for Cincinnati Public Radio. Tune in on Wednesdays at 5:49 and 7:50 a.m. and 3:04 p.m. on 91.7 WVXU to hear the final two. That's it from us. Happy Juneteenth all.